Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome back to tonight's second half. Before we get into tonight's second half, a couple links I'd like to share with everyone. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. My merch is displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe, click the like button, and please leave a comment. It really does help, and it matters. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Tonight's first encounter. Throwback about 5 years ago when my boyfriend and I first started hanging out. It was late at night and we had gone to a park to chill. I live on the Gulf Coast, West Florida Panhandle to be exact, and our town has a bay. So the park had docks for people to string their boats up. We're sitting on one of the floating docks just chatting when I happen to look across the water to the shore. There was something floating on top of the water. It looked like one of those styrofoam fishing buoys. I'm not sure what it was, but it was enough to grab my attention. Our conversation lulled. I didn't know it at the time, but my boyfriend was watching as well. I watched this thing pull itself onto the sand in the light of the street lamp. The closest thing I can describe it is a person wearing a black morph suit crawling low to the ground, on all fours like in a horror movie, elbows out, legs at odd angles. Anyway, it slithered off into the sawgrass, and my boyfriend and I emphatically confirmed that we both saw the same thing. He, lovable skeptic that he is, dragged me over to check for tracks in the sand or handprints with fresh splash marks. I'm not kidding, actual 5-fingered handprints. We got into the car pretty fast. We're both ecologists, and we know a lot about wildlife in our area. And we still have not come up with an answer. I apologize I neglected some major details. This creature had no snout or tail, which ruled out a lot of wildlife like raccoon, gator, black bear, and even the mythical panther. I purposely checked for this in the moment and confirmed it with my boyfriend after. After crawling out of the water, this thing went straight into the sawgrass, which extends for literally miles because it's Gulf Island National Seashore. Also, the park is very well lit, and there was a street lamp shining directly onto the shore. This was not a trick of the light. I am absolutely sure of it. Tonight's second encounter. Me and a group, there are 4 of us in total, go on a hike, Blood Mountain, Georgia. A sacred mountain for the Cherokee, from my understanding. The hike starts off nice enough. It starts getting foggy, and we think it's pretty awesome looking in the woods. Everything's going fine until I get onto this path that looks freshly made. I walk down it, maybe 8 feet, and I see a single hoof print embedded, really deep into the dirt. It looks pretty fresh. My immediate thought is boars, which we weren't prepared to deal with. So we go back and head on. I think back now, and it seems too big to be a boar, but I don't know anything about how big they can get. About 30 or so minutes later, we start hearing stuff behind us, rustling in the woods, and at one point, we hear a soft roar. It sounded really strange, and quite frankly, I had never heard anything like it. We're getting a bit nervous, but we continue. Eventually, we come to a side trail that's marked for shelter. I'm curious, so I went to check it out. It's longer than I'd like, but I kept going. About 2 miles down the trail, I hear a huge rustle right next to me. Naturally, I get out of there, running back to my group. I explain what I heard to them, and they think it might be a bear. Nothing supernatural or strange comes to our mind. We continue on to the top without any problems, except for some really strange smells, and the fog is thickening. It's on the way down that we have the real experience. The fog's getting extremely thick now. Visibility is probably 7 feet ahead at the lowest point, and about 5 feet ahead at the highest point toward the end of the hike. We start back the way we came from the peak, and I see something duck behind a tree. It was in my visibility, so it was not the fog playing tricks on me. The best way I can describe it was that it was definitely humanoid. About a little over half my height, it was black and light gray and had fur. I didn't get a good look at its face. I looked behind the tree and nothing was there. We kept going. The fog is getting thicker. As we continue, we start hearing noises behind us quite often. The most concerning moment was the fact that we couldn't hear any natural noises. The rain's falling and no sound. Birds are not chirping, no wind. The only sound we can hear is us. I should explain that we had difficulty coming down the rest of the hike since one of the hikers was having trouble with his ankle, causing us to rest quite often. It was during one of these rests that I went off to take a whiz. I'm slightly in the woods, but not completely because I'm too freaked out to venture away from the group, or even go off the trail for that matter. I hear this heavy breath in my ear. I gasp, turn around, and nothing's there. We continued on, and 20 minutes later we start hearing the rain and the natural noises again like normal. Nothing besides the noises continue until we get off the trail up the mountain and onto one off the mountain. We're resting on some rocks, talking about the stuff we had seen when 6 bursts of roars came in front of us and behind us. It was the same sound as before, and there was no break in between them. It finished with a sound I cannot really explain. It was like a mixture between a roar and a snort, and it was right next to me. I shouted, grabbed my knife, and turned, and of course, nothing was there. It was at this point the troubles with the hiker's ankle was so bad we had to split up into 2 groups of 2 and grab the car and wait for them at the trailhead. Me and another hiker go off to get the car, eventually finding the road. We find the 2 of them, and one of them says they saw an old man in what he says are scout uniforms. I assume he meant Boy Scouts. He said he was in a green and brown button-down shirt and khaki pants, just standing there between 2 trees, stepped right and disappeared. We get out of the area, and the fog immediately lifts. We all agree we were being followed, but by what in question? Briefly, before we get to the third encounter, I kind of wanted to touch on something that I've been thinking about lately. One of the times that I went up to where Tom Mezek disappeared, and I had hit Lily Pond Road and then went up Lily Pond Trail, and on my way back I was followed by something on both sides of me. And I had talked about it about a week ago, but it's really stayed in my head, and I don't know what it is. And it's getting cooler now, and I'm going to be making a trip up there pretty soon because I really like the location. I don't know why. I know that something bad happened there, but the location, it kind of draws you in, and it gives you a comfortable feeling. And I don't know if that's because of what's there or if it's the kind of quartz appeal, because a lot of the Adirondacks are quartz, and I don't know if that's has anything to do with it. But it's just something I've been thinking about lately. And each time I think about what was trailing me, for some reason I don't see Dogman. I see kind of like a crawler, to be honest with you. 2 of them side by side. Well, one on one side and one on the other of the trail, which the trail is not small and not huge. It's large enough for a kind of side by side to fit down. A little smaller than a road, smaller than a 1-laned road, about the size of a fire road, I guess. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. Something's drawing me back to that place, and I'm looking forward to going back. So I don't know. Anyway, let's get on to tonight's third experience. 3 or 4 years ago, I was driving from York, Nebraska, going north on US 81. It was really early in the morning, maybe 2 or 3 a.m., without another car in sight. I remember the moon being bright and how the surrounding fields were illuminated well, considering there were no lights along the road. I'm somewhere around the Stromsburg area, knee-high cornfields on either side of me, with an occasional grove of trees scattered along the way. I momentarily take my eyes off of the road to see a large white figure in the distance, standing in the field a few yards from the roadside. I slow down a bit, curious because I've traveled this road several times before now without encountering a thing. And as I near, I see this huge white dog of some sorts just standing there watching my car as I approach it. I'm mystified and get goosebumps seeing this ghostly-looking animal, illuminated by the moonlight at an ungodly hour, wondering whose giant dog is roaming around the dark this close to the highway. Normally, I would stop and see if I could find a collar and a tag on a dog without an owner, but this dog is not one I'd want to mess with if it was not friendly. I take my eyes off this animal and back to the road as I finally pass it, but when I look back I can't see it anywhere. At the time I didn't think anything of it, but looking back, the dog had been big enough to stand above the crops, so if it was still in the corn, I wouldn't have seen it. With an open highway and no trees close by, there weren't many places it could have hid. It's Nebraska, so at the time I was sure it was just a dog or maybe some guy's wolf dog or something, but certainly not a wild wolf. I've since learned about skinwalkers, and though we do have native territory all throughout Nebraska, as far as I know, skinwalkers are Navajo-specific legend. Plus, being a Nebraskan for many years, the thought of the paranormal juxtaposed against cornfields is hard for me to believe. I've had 3 strange or scary encounters with huge white dogs in my lifetime, all coincidental and twice out of nowhere, so regardless, it's still a strange encounter in my life. I think they're spot on, not immediately jumping to skinwalker. I really hate that when people do that. It's not their fault either. It's movies, Hollywood, creepypasta, and stuff like that. I think the guy or woman saw a Dogman, probably on all fours, just standing in the field, maybe looking for prey or just scoping out the roadside. They do some pretty goofy stuff sometimes, as we've heard in the past, just they'll randomly stand by a road for some reason, maybe to scare people, or maybe hoping someone will stop and think it is a dog with a collar and a tag so they can identify it. Who knows, but definitely a creepy encounter, especially late at night like that. Tonight's fourth encounter. I was around 9 when I experienced my first supernatural cryptid sighting. I was playing in the backyard while my mom was planting flowers. We had a small fenced area connected to the house, then a small stretch of grass that goes down and up and then into the woods. The woods are a decent size and connected to a large nature preserve, so we sometimes have deer and coyote in the backyard. I was in the fenced area playing with our dogs and digging around in the garden bed, trying to find worms and beetles, when I heard a cat start yowling in the woods. We have a bunch of stray cats in the neighborhood, and they like to hunt and play in the woods, so I didn't think anything of it. However, when a second cat began to yowl, I got worried. I assumed that they were fighting. I started walking up the steps to our porch where the back door was so I could get my mom or dad. We had dealt with cats getting hurt before, including losing eyes, ears, and tips of tails in fights. So I wanted to see if either of the parents would go back there and break the fight up, considering that I was not allowed back there by myself. I made it about halfway up the stairs when a third cat joined in, and I knew that something was wrong. I slowly made my way back down the steps and watched the woods A fourth cat began to yowl, and a fifth. I stopped counting after that. More and more cats joined, creating a chorus of horrible noise and scaring me badly. Then the dogs started. The neighborhood dogs began to bark. They yipped and yowled and growled right along with the cats. My own dogs freaked out as well, sprinting toward the fence and slamming into it over and over, snarling and barking angrily like something was right in front of them. I was frozen in my spot, terrified. I waited for my mom to come out and break me from my trance, but she didn't. It was only later that I learned that she had heard the cats and dogs all freaking out, but just ignored it. Suddenly, all of the animals stopped and it became dead silent. We have big families living all around us, ones with noisy kids. We lived close to an interstate and close to a mall. However, all of the noise that's usually there was gone. Even the birds stopped chirping. I heard a twig snap at the far edge of the woods and turned to look, and that's when I saw it. All black, extremely tall, long arms that almost touched the ground, and long legs. It was unnaturally thin. It slowly walked across the edge of the forest, its arms swinging lazily at its side. The sticks under it cracked and broke with ease. It lifted its long, thin leg and stepped over a fallen log, one that at the time was higher off the ground than I was. Once it got over the log, it turned its head towards me, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. It didn't have a face. It was just a black void. The infinite void of space and time. There was nothing there. We stared at each other, me not blinking as its face stayed turned towards mine. I wanted to scream, but I could not. I couldn't scream, I couldn't move, I couldn't even breathe. The thing finally turned back toward the woods and took a few more steps, breaking sticks and trampling dead leaves, and disappeared into the trees. Once it was gone, I ran to my mom and told her what had happened. She brushed it off. This is when she told me about hearing animals but not doing anything. She chalked it up to my imagination. You see, I had gotten really into Bigfoot, watching all these documentaries and stuff. I wanted to see one so badly. At the time, I was super excited, thinking I had seen a Bigfoot. I told all my friends, and everyone thought it was cool. It wasn't until years later that I realized that the creature I saw was not Bigfoot. It didn't look anything like what people had seen. It wasn't big, muscular, hairy man-beast. It was skinny, black, and tall. It was faceless. It sunk in that what I had seen that day was not some childish urban legend. It was something that I had never seen before or since. I had no idea what I had seen. I had no idea what seen me. When I first told some people about what I had seen, they asked me if I had been watching Slender Man videos. First of all, I didn't know anything about Slender Man until years later. And secondly, if Slender Man was real, it wasn't him. There have been numerous reports of people seeing black light kind of crawlers that, have faces, or ones that don't. I mean, there are people that have seen your atypical white kind of glowing crawler with no face. So that's something I can't discount, Tonight's final encounter. Just recently, my closest friend, TJ, he brought up a repressed memory that I had of one of the most terrifying ops we had been on, and by far, the most unexplained. We were doing some recon ops through the Pamar mountain range, as we received reports that Al-Qaeda insurgents had been moving through the area increasingly more and more. For those of you who do not know, the Pamar Mountains hold some of the tallest mountains in the world and intersect with the Himalayan mountains. The range goes through Pakistan and Afghanistan. They have some beautiful views, and had it not been for this experience, I would have easily gone back and gone hiking. We were in some heavily forested, heavily snowed region in northernmost Afghanistan. It was around midnight, and we had set up a temporary camp to try and get a couple of hours of sleep. TJ and I were first on guard for about an hour, when we began to feel like we were being watched. Now, that feeling of being watched is almost tangible, like you could reach out and touch it and feel it. It was almost like someone's eyes were digging into your back. We sat there, rifles at ready, in case we heard a whoop or hollering of enemy insurgents. But that never happened. Instead, we heard breathing, hard, heavy, animalistic breathing. It was not staggered, it was like labored, but it sounded like it was something massive. We had no idea what it could have been. I slowly got up, fanning my field of vision around where we had heard the breathing coming from. It took me a minute, but I saw what it was coming from. The SOB was massive, at least 9 to 10 feet tall, covered in dark, shaggy fur, and its arms dangled past its knees. Good God, I'm getting goosebumps typing this out. Its eyes had an almost luminescent glow about them. It looked like your typical Bigfoot report, but something was different. Other than it being massive, it didn't seem to try to distance itself from us. It was almost like it was scouting us out. When I turned on my tack light on the rifle to try and get a better look, my heart literally jumped 3 feet out of my body. The thing was snarling, teeth bared, and it had a look of pure murder. I jumped and screamed like a little girl and called out, "Contact, contact, contact!" TJ and I trained our rifle on this creature and opened fire. Letting out a full mag into this monster, it howled and screams bounced off the mountain range like a foghorn. The rest of my team woke up and ducked down in certain spots, training their rifle towards the monster. The creature howled and hauled all kinds of ass down the hill, leaving a trail of blood in the snow. We moved out in negative 30 seconds after that. For the next hour, we hauled down the mountain, never stopping, resting, the whole time feeling like it had its eyes on us. By the time we made it down the slope, we had cleared 22 miles in less than 4 hours. TJ and I were crapping ourselves the whole time, wondering what we had seen. After doing some research on the idea of Bigfoot in the Middle East, the only thing I ended up coming across was a creature called the Barmanu. It's mostly seen by shepherds throughout the Pamar and Himalayan. It is reported to be extremely intelligent, as well as one of the most violent. Wow, guys. All right. So that is tonight's second half. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'm getting ready to do an interview as we speak right now, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you guys will enjoy it tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed this one too. With that, may the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life.